pase. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, May 31st, 2022. I'm Kevin Laramie and I'll be joined by Duane Rollins. Please, we'll invite you to subscribe to our YouTube page as we go on our journey to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you for watching us live on Twitter. Podcasts available everywhere. Special show today. Never a dull moment covering Major League Soccer. Charlotte FC have fired their manager Miguel Angel Ramirez earlier today. And today we're going to have a special show explaining all the different angles and why. I've talked to my sources in Charlotte. There's multiple angles, multiple views, and we'll break down statistically and also explain why this firing is a shock and also not so much of a shock in Major League Soccer. But first, Duane, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I want to do a quick shout out to Blue Collar Dan, who just told us to let's go and have a good show. So thanks for listening, Blue Collar Dan. I appreciate that little pep talk to go.
Thank you. That's Dan in Edmonton, and also we wish you good luck today selling houses in Edmonton, and also following your club. We wish your club gets a victory as soon as possible. But today, Duane, we're going to be talking about Charlotte FC, which is becoming a meme at this point. Let's start with the facts. The facts are that Charlotte FC have fired manager Miguel Angel Ramirez earlier today. They're currently 8th in the Eastern Conference, 2 points away from a playoff spot. But that's not the reason. Their record is not too bad, 14 games in MLS this season, 5 wins, 8 losses, 1 loss. Wins are at home. It's been one draw. I mean, it's been difficult on the road. 13 goals for, 18 goals against, a differential of -5. But that's not why he was fired. And that's a bit of the reason of today's show. The raison d'être, we would say in French. That's a French expression of the day. Is there's a whole timeline. And Duane, I'm going to bring you back before we go back about today. I'm going to bring you back to February. And look at this. They were screwed. Apparently, he was the one being screwed. Those are his comments made on February 12, 2022, before the beginning of the season in the roster building phase still. At that point, Charlotte FC head coach Miguel Angel Ramirez admitted the club is screwed ahead of their inaugural match on February 26th against DC United after facing roster setbacks. The team originally set its sights on reaching the MLS Cup playoff during their first year in the league. A goal Ramirez revealed will be very difficult to obtain and to attain given the circumstances. We need to reinforce the squad, said the Spaniard. We need to have something else to be more competitive. So those were his comments back on February. And it was already shots fired across the board and a window into the mindset of Charlotte and how there was already a contentious relationship at that point. Duane, let's go back to February. What did you remember about those comments? And when we put it in perspective now, it's very interesting to look back at those comments.
Yeah, I think if you go back in our archives, you can hear us discuss what we thought about them at the time, because I do think we dedicated a segment on them because they were so noteworthy, because they were so candid. And you're not used to hearing a manager respond in such a candid way in Major League Soccer. It's not as abnormal in Europe or in other cultures where the game is everything and there aren't other sports to distract, where you have often managers that end up talking through the media to try and, generate more transfers. Part of that's the culture around the team. Part of it's the fact that MLS has different spending rules, and maybe he wasn't completely aware of those or didn't completely understand what he was getting into. And that sometimes happens when you bring an outsider into these jobs. But what I thought about at the time was that it was kind of, I was excited by it because it thought like our Charlotte might be entertaining. We have a show that tries to entertain. So there was that. But in terms of what it signified, it suggested to me that you didn't have a front office and a manager on the same wavelength. And that alarm bells, that on Twitter when you put all the red lights flashing. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yep, and at the second half of the show today, Duane, I'll explain what I learned over the last few hours on why, concretely, the sides didn't meet in agreement and why they had difficulty working together there's 6 big contention points that we can talk about later in the show. So in February, that's what he said. And then I'll bring you back to another point in the timeline. This was in March 11th, 2022, asking if he regrets saying that they were screwed. And then he doubled down on his comments. In March, he mentioned, no, not at all. If anything, it was the opposite. Ramirez said, the team came to me and asked how we can help. What do you need from us? We will do it, they said. If we can help you, we're all in this together. Also, to see how the club can help give us more resources to get better. No one felt uncomfortable because they knew I wasn't just speaking for myself, but everyone. For them and me. Now we are seeing what we need to compete in a competitive team. This was a sentiment of everyone, and they all understood that is what we wanted. It's very interesting to me how those comments have not necessarily aged well. No one was uncomfortable. I think, Miguel, you weren't uncomfortable, but I think the front office, David Tepper, Zoran, maybe all the other parties were involved and maybe a little bit uncomfortable because the first opportunity they had, they fired you. Yes, you lost a game 2-1 a late Sunday night in Seattle, but you lost your job on February 11th, 2022.
Yeah, and there's been some significant turnover across the board. So I have trouble not necessarily blaming the manager here. When you look at the record, it's an expansion team and you have a realistic expectation of what the season should have brought for them. I read this morning they have the 6th best record of any expansion team in history at this point in their goings, like in this point of the season. That's not too bad when you consider how rapid expansion is going to make Major League Soccer. I mean,
yes, and they're 8th right now on the sheet. They're just 2 points away from Miami. They're better than Miami almost, and Miami's been exactly. So there's a lot more to this story, Duane.
Yeah, and look, conflicts happen all the time, but it does speak to like a lack of screening, a lack of understanding from both parties. I mean, there's blame to go around to both parties here as well. But look, you got to look at the management. You got to wonder what's going on. I think Taylor Twellman tweeted this morning something that I thought was pretty well. He always has good takes, in my opinion. He's one of my favorite analysts of the game in North America. And, his underlying point was that MLS is a league that really rewards consistency of roster, consistency of makeup, consistency of managers. And if you flip and flip and flip, ask Cincinnati. We talk about this all the time with them. It doesn't get you anywhere. If you keep chasing the greener grass, you're eventually just going to kill the grass you have, and then you can't play on it, right? You play on dirt, and that's not going to work.
No, well, you're right. And by the way, we should mention before we continue that Miguel Angel Ramirez wasn't the only one being fired. It was across the board. There was a firing here. So here are the different, people that lost their job and ones that got a promotion. Assistant coach Christian Latenzio will serve as interim for the rest of the season. Assistant coach Mikel Antia was fired. Head fitness coach Cristobal Fuentes Nieto was also fired. And first team video analyst Luis Piedrahita was also fired. So you're looking at changes across the board. And later on in the show, in the second half of the show, we'll talk about the changing in the front office of Tepper Sports and Entertainment over the last 3 months, and even longer than that if you include NFL and other entities of this sports ownership group. There's been a lot of movement, there's been a lot of content, and a lot of bad interpersonal relationship in the front offices of those entities. And we'll break down that in the second half of the show when we talk about Nick Kelly and how he left the TSC and especially Charlotte FC and how this unfolded. When we put the pieces together and look at the whole timeline, this picture gets more clear. Now let's cross the divide, cross the Rubicon, and go look at Charlotte's reaction to this firing. Those are the quotes from Charlotte FC themselves, from the owner David Tepper, owner of Tepper Sports and Entertainment. This is a difficult decision, but one we feel is best for the team at this time, said owner David Tepper. I want to thank Miguel and his staff for their hard work during our first season and wish them the best in their future endeavors. Now, the reaction from the club directly. This is from the sporting director, Zoran Kerneta. We appreciate the contributions of Miguel and his staff to our club and wish them well moving forward in their careers. We are excited about this opportunity for Christian. He is a very experienced coach who has a tremendous impact on our squad this season. When I look at these reactions, when I look at this, Duane, it does look to me as a first opportunity taken by the club to get rid of Miguel Angel Ramirez. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit of behind-the-scenes story, Duane. I was working on this game Sunday night. We were broadcasting this game on TVA Sports, Seattle versus Charlotte, which ended up being a comeback win by Seattle, but nothing to be ashamed of for Charlotte. They played maybe one of their best games on the road this season. But during the broadcast, Duane, I was kind of wondering why they kept showing Miguel Angel Ramirez every 15 to 20 minutes for a few seconds on FS1, who was broadcasting and producing this game in Seattle. So you were seeing him on the broadcast often, which means the broadcast teams was talking about him and they were cutting to a camera that was showing him. And I was wondering, why are they talking about him so much? Well, things are starting to fall into place. Things are starting to make sense. And this was a hard decision. This was a decision that was taken a long time ago, and this was the first opportunity to implement that decision by Charlotte FC.
It's not a hard decision when you're firing a coach who's relatively successful 16 games into his tenure. That's not a hard choice. That's you're right. It's just a choice. It's a decision that they made. They regret hiring him, obviously, and they want to get rid of him fast because there is no sporting justification. Using the pure numbers on the field, using the eyeball test that the average fan can see, there is no justification to his firing. You see the rest of the staff walk out with him. That's almost as troubling because they're basically down to nothing now. They're going to have to rely on a bare bones.
They have an assistant coach and they have a goalkeeper coach. So between the two and the sporting director, they'll assure the interim until the end of the season.
Yeah, and that's not a lot. This isn't 1972 here, guys. Like this is going to be bare bones in the coaching situation for the rest of the year. Now, I understand when those guys walked. I'm sure that generally what happens in those situations is that head coaches bring in their own assistants. They have people they work with, and they often will walk anyway. So that they probably just found it easier to spontaneously get rid of them in one swoop. Look, in terms of putting the interim on for the rest of the season, it's going to be a weird coaching kind of carousel this year. I think there's probably going to be a lot more coaches available next January. So I think it does maybe make sense because you have the World Cup. So people are going to defer kind of moves, and the international coaches are going to stay in the international game longer. And it's just everything's going to be a little bit different this summer. I don't think it's going to be a big window, both for coaches or players. I mean, we've seen a lot of the big movements already in terms of the player side. So I suspect coaching will be similar. So it gives them time to find the right search. So I don't mind that, but you have to ask yourself, do you trust this ownership group to get it right when they've done this already? And this is a big personality. And I think that maybe we were all guilty a little bit of giving them too much of a long rope based on some of the stuff that they were saying in the lead up to this win. They were very much, we're going to reinvent the wheel. And we see that sometimes in MLS. Teams come through and they think that they have it all figured out. And then they quickly learn that MLS is a humbling league to play in, and that you can only be good for so long, and that you have to get things perfectly. And if you make a mistake, it's going to be amplified much more than it will be in other leagues around the world. And Charlotte's doing okay, but if you're moving around this quick, I don't have a lot of faith. It seems like you have an owner that wants to be a GM, which is never a good sign.
No, that's never a good sign in any sports, even in the NFL, by the way.
Well,
which is the same owner. It's the same owner. So there you go.
Yeah, and look, I mean, my NFL team is the Dallas Cowboys, and so he's getting older now, so he's less involved. But Mr. Jones has been a problem since the 90s. But anyway.
No, well, you're right. And we'll see how Charlotte changes how they're perceived. Because right now, their reputation is not good in Charlotte. And that's not just Charlotte FC. That's the Tepper Sports and Entertainment. And that is David Tepper. That is the organization. And we'll break down after this short break the reasons why there was big problems between Miguel Angel Ramirez and Charlotte FC and David Tepper. What are the problems at Tepper Sports and Entertainment? Why did Nick Kelly leave? Why is there articles in the Sports Business Journal and the Charlotte Observer detailing maybe a toxic working environment and even more? Yes. We have a lot more to talk about. On this Charlotte FC big news today, Miguel Angel Ramirez is gone. Christian Latenzio takes over. And after this short break, we'll continue explaining why this is important for Major League Soccer. After this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. We'll invite you to go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Sports Podcast Network. In the next 9 days, Duane and I will debut the Sports Podcast Network's premium show called the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast, covering the Canadian men's national team on the road to Qatar 2022. And speaking of, just minutes ago, Canada Soccer announced that on June 5th, they will play Panama at BC Place, and all lower bowl tickets are $30 only. Please go ahead, catch your tickets for this replacement game that takes over for the Canada, I guess I say Canada instead of Canada, but Canada versus Iran game at BC Place, June 5th. $30 to get in. You can watch Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, and Alistair Johnston, best defender in Canada, play against Panama. And you maybe listen to Van Halen on the way there, and you're gonna have some good times, having some fun. Now, I've been waiting for this moment for the entire show, Duane. I've been talking to my friends in Charlotte, and there's a lot of reasons why. There was problems between the staff, Miguel Angel Ramirez, and Charlotte FC, and here are why he was fired. According to multiple sources, and you'll hear the same buzzword at a couple different spots, that's not a coincidence. The problems between Miguel Angel Ramirez and Charlotte FC put into perspective, there were some early chasms and disagreements on roster building. We know that. Those early disagreements and chasm changed into subordination, and the perceived subordination on Ramirez's part in the media, that is the "we're screwed" saga, and the backing down of it, and also the doubling down on it. Those are the reasons for the perceived subordination. Let's not forget, they're the same ownership group that owns an NFL team, and you don't want all your staff to know that they can just walk all over you and demand more out of you. So that perceived subordination on Ramirez's part in the media was a big problem behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, there was internal subordination by Ramirez, doubling down, not only doing it via the media, but doing it in person. Heated conversations early on in the relationship, the difference in blood type, meaning a Latin Spanish passion, meaning with corporate America structure, that created a whole lot of friction and a whole lot of misunderstanding from both sides, which created a big difference in the business culture of these people that came from different backgrounds of career. Corporate America versus Spanish passion soccer, football. When they meet, there's a clash, and the corporate America side won the clash. Ramirez's ultimate commitment mentality was a problem, and maybe that's too much too. He asks every single ounce of your being as a manager. The players like it because it stems to results, but it brings a lot of, I guess, friction, conflict. It's a demand of perfectionism that is almost unrealistic. And those commitment, what they would brand as ultimate commitment for Ramirez, was a bit too much. But with that perfectionism comes a different level of expectations of professionalism, and that was a big problem there too, Duane. For what Ramirez thought is how a structure of a team should be, and how a professional soccer team should be played and coached and managed and owned, those were big problems. What he thought was going to be given to him, and what he figured or assumed was normal for a professional soccer team, was not always given to him, and the other side had a bit more of a corporate way of looking at it. It's been, oh, we'll get there, it's okay, we can just start slow. A big difference. And Duane, to me, those are, well, yeah, it stems from, maybe you're right, due diligence wasn't met by both when they made the agreement to come into a partnership and him becoming the coach of Charlotte. Maybe one side didn't look into it enough, and maybe the other side also, because this feels to me like a marriage that should have never happened to begin with.
Yeah, you mentioned the conflict between sort of passion Latin thinking and or passion thinking in general. I don't know if we need to put it to one part of the world, just for sports passion and the corporate culture, and that is always going to be a conflict within a Major League Soccer structure. And when we get these NFL owners in, I think there is a bit of and I think MLSE experiences too, because they're not an NFL owner, but they're an owner of other professional sports. Any entity that owns a bigger North American type sport and comes into MLS, I think has to adjust to the different culture of the game. And I don't know whether Charlotte ownership is showing a willingness to do this right now. You said that the ownership won, the corporate won the day. I don't know if Ramirez would feel the same way. I think he might feel that he escaped a burning bush or burning like a train wreck, right? And he might have won it his own way.
That's true. Well, maybe it was his goal all along, saying we're screwed. I don't regret. Just fire me if you dare, because you're gonna have to pay me, and that's maybe the case. But then the other part of the story starts to come to fruition. And when I mean the other part of the story is not just the Charlotte FC part, Duane, but also the Tepper Sports and Entertainment part. Because that's a big deal. That's a big deal in Charlotte. They're a big ownership group. And now I'm going to bring you to the Charlotte Observer. This was published on May 4th. And it's fascinating. Let's have a little look here. Nick Kelly, Tepper Sports CEO Nick Kelly, stepping down from role he took on in February. He took the job in February and he steps down in May. Here's the first few lines of the article. Nick Kelly is stepping down as Tepper Sports and Entertainment Chief Executive Officer after 3 months on the job, marking the latest in a string of high-level staff turnover at the organization in the last 6 months. So May, 6 months before that, would bring it to all the way to last December. Kelly's departure was announced Wednesday, which is May 4th, and it comes 2 weeks after TSE stopped construction on the Carolina Panthers headquarters in Rock Hill, South Carolina, due to a disagreement between the city and the company. Kelly was appointed the CEO position at TSC, the ownership group of the Panthers and Major League Soccer's expansion team Charlotte FC, in February, amid a shakeup of leadership across the organizations. A press release issued by both TSC-owned teams said that Kelly has chosen to step down from his role as CEO. A company spokesperson declined to provide additional details about the change. Nick played an integral role in laying the groundwork of Charlotte FC's inaugural season and was a key contributor to TSE. Owner David Tepper said in a press release, "We appreciate his efforts and wish him and his family the best as they move forward." But that's not all. Let's move to the Sports Business Journal. Nick Kelly's departure from TSC latest and ongoing turnover. Tepper Sports and Entertainment CEO Nick Kelly stepped down. He's the latest in a string of high-level turnover. And again, a talk of different views, difficult business relationship, disagreements, negativity, fights, internal difficult relations. This feels to me like what we would call an hypercritical management system in today's world that leads to an environment of work that is not, well, conducive to have creative freedom and a positive working relationship. This feels like an organizational problem to me, Duane.
Well, okay, I'll use some corporate terms here since we're talking about corporate. It's top down is what it sounds like. You have a very top down for the owner leadership structure there that, to use the parlance of the times, appears to be a little bit toxic. While you were talking there, I was trying to get what Nick Kelly's age was. He looks like he's a relatively young man. Maybe if you could find that, I don't know. But nonetheless, he doesn't look like he's particularly of an older generation. And I suspect maybe there might be some disconnect there too in terms of how leadership structure used to work versus how it works now, and you might have a bit of that kind of generational stuff happening in this too.
So he's under 40 and he's in the top 40 under 40 in the corporate world according to Sports Business Journal, and he's one of the upcoming and really a very highly touted executive in the sports world in the US.
Yeah, that's based on the photo. That's the first thing that jumped out to me is that you might be seeing some of that stuff you're seeing across all industries right now, where younger workers are no longer willing to put up with toxicness, no longer willing to put up with top-down structures, wants to be able to be creative in their roles, want to be able to let their talent shine. And I for one applaud that. So I'm on their side there. Now I don't know for sure whether that's happening, but that's just a theory that I'm having right there based on this. Um, Look, I all of this it's stunning, really. Like this seems like generally I try to give the benefit of the doubt to both sides of
Yeah.
this, try to be journalistic about this, but this just seems like madness to me that you have an egomaniac running this organization that thinks that he knows all and is unwilling to take any criticism and is just pushing everyone out the door that might help him and is eventually going to run this damn team into the ground. Honestly, that's what will happen. Sorry, if you're listening to us from Charlotte, this isn't a bash on Charlotte or the capability of the market or anything like that. It's just an observation based on someone who's followed this league for a long time and has seen up close and personal how bad things can get quickly when you don't know what you're bloody doing at the top. I'm in Toronto. If you don't know that, TFC early days were terrible.
And of course, I'm going to add that Nick Kelly was in charge of starting the big program of renovating Bank of America Stadium that would make it to the level of today's standard, at least for the next decade, and that is on hold at this point. The construction of the training center is on hold for the Carolina Panthers, and there was the one for basically Charlotte that just started building not long ago. So that's the one side. I want to end the show by talking about the other side, because there could be a lot of column A, and there could be also a little bit of column B. This is not a new story for Miguel Angel Ramirez. This is the third time the same story happens. In March 2001, he was signed by Internacional in Brazil, in the Serie A in Brazil, as their manager. And on June 11th, 2021, the timeline is very similar. Well, he got fired because he was not playing the way, or at least he was not playing the game as like the relationship game with the ownership group, the same way as that relationship and wanted to. Brazilians have a particular way of doing things, and Miguel Angel Ramirez did not get behind it. He wanted to do things his way, and it turns out that it did not work out in the long term. We can go back to this job before that, which was the same, Independiente del Valle in Ecuador. He was there for a year and a couple months, not that long. So when we're looking at this situation, it is a bit of the same story that keeps repeating and repeating for this manager. Is it going to change? Is it a little bit of him? Is his ultimate commitment mentality too much? Is his perfectionism and the way he asks his bosses to implement his mentality, is it too much to ask? Is he asking too much out of the players? Is he asking too much out of his employer? And do challenging your employer to that level is conducive to a proper working relationship also? Those are all questions that I wish I had answer to. But when I look deep down into all the aspects of this firing, there's a lot of reasons on one side and there's some reason on the other. It was a marriage that was never going to work to begin with. And at the end of the day, we're seeing this come to a halt, come to a resolution today when Charlotte FC fired Miguel Angel Ramirez. It is not for a sporting reason. It is for a relationship and for a behind-the-scene reasons. It's for insubordination, and it's for just not having done the due diligence of Miguel Angel Ramirez knowing what he was getting into, signing with TSC, and also TSC not knowing what they were doing, hiring a very flamboyant character as Miguel Angel Ramirez as their manager. He reminds me a bit of Gabriel Heinze, but maybe not all the way there. But there's something similar to it. And there's something similar that can be said in the relationship in the locker room. And then you can go all the way to player management and international players leaving early to go to their club. Karol Swiderski, who missed the late last game on Sunday because he was with the Polish national team with international break. There's a lot of things in this franchise that haven't been started properly. And when we look deep down on how to resolve these things, the team thought it was best to get rid of the manager. The manager probably was happy because he's still going to get paid and now he can just go home. Hopefully the players respond, and that's where we'll know. The player responded to Miguel Angel Ramirez on the field. They are 8th in the standings, 2 points behind Miami in a playoff spot, which is pretty good and one of the best expansion record after 16 games that you have seen in MLS. Now, how will they react? How will Charlotte, the players, find a way to rescue this? Those are all great questions, and we'll know after the international break when Charlotte plays again in MLS. And maybe with Latenzio, they can have stability moving forward, and maybe some calm and cool-headed head will prevail. But those are all great options, and we'll see if Charlotte can turn things around over the next few weeks. And now it's a perfect time, international break. They have time for Latenzio to come in, to change a few things he wants to change, talk to their players, and build his new philosophy of play moving forward. And we'll see, hopefully this won't affect the relationship of the fans with the team. But right now, mixed messages on, of course, for the fans. Because on one side, you're happy with the results, and on the other side, what is happening behind the scenes. But those are all great things, and we'll have more, of course, on Soccer Today over the next few days. Tomorrow, it's our Canadian Premier League review, and we will look at more games. Forge plays today, and we'll break it all down tomorrow on Soccer Today. Until then, you can follow myself at Kev Laramie, Duane at 24th Minute, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. We will be back, of course, over the next few days. And if you were looking for the podcast version of this show, you can find it everywhere you find your favorite podcasts, at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts. And you can find, of course, our Patreon page at patreon.com/Sports Podcast Network. Over the next few weeks, we will have our premium show, the Two Solid Dudes Soccer Podcast, talking about the Canadian men's national team on the road to Qatar 2022. And it will be available for all you premium subscribers. And of course, if you're looking for advertising opportunities, we have those right here. You can contact me at sportspodcastnetwork@gmail.com. As always, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Laramie. And until next time, I hope the manager of your team doesn't get fired. And to all, a great soccer.